Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. 2024 is shaping up to be a bumper year for Australian microbrands. We just had our very first microbrand watch show in Melbourne last week, Wristwatch Check, which was a great success. And we've had a couple of new brands launched this year already, and we're not even halfway through. The first was Hertz or HZ watches. They did really well with their HZ01, a neat little titanium quartz piece that I bought and then reviewed a couple of months back. And today it's the second new brand, also out of Melbourne, called Ocean to Orbit. Now, Dave and Sid, the two men behind Ocean to Orbit, are both car designers. They met while working for Ford here in Australia, and they have brought all of that design experience and knowledge to bear with this, their first watch, the Lotsa. Now, if that model name sounds familiar yet unfamiliar, Lotsa is the world's fourth largest mountain. Dave and Sid have been working on this project now for several years, so long in fact that they were able to send a prototype of the Lotsa to the peak of Lotsa on the wrist of a Nepalese photojournalist and mountaineer. You can read all about that on their website. Now, that is just crazy forward planning and attention to detail. And it worked for Rolex, perhaps it will work for Ocean to Orbit. If you want to see even more attention to detail, have a look at some of the 3D animation on their website. It would put many of the top Swiss brands to shame. But what about the watch, I hear you cry, Jody? Don't worry, we'll have a look at it soon enough. Now, you saw the pop-up? This video is sponsored by Ocean to Orbit. I will therefore of course leave a link in the description of the video to their website. They're taking pre-orders on these at the moment with around a month left of the discounts. The first 200 units of the watch will be shipping in September this year. Let's start, as is the way, by looking at the packaging. Again, fabulous attention to detail here, both from the outer cardboard box, the inner cardboard box, and all of the sleeves. This may be their first watch, but clearly it is not their first rodeo designing a product, that's for sure. You also get the feeling straight away that this is a premium offering. And it is. I'll discuss the price a little bit later on. We've got a polishing cloth, a warranty card, instruction manual, all featuring heaps of information and diagrams and specifications of the watch. It feels like Dave and Sid have really geeked out with all of this and enjoyed adding all of these extra little touches, which I'm sure they have done. And then finally we're onto the watch itself. Now, in the Explorer tradition, this is a three-hand no date with a no date specific movement. But unlike the Roller, this one features no Arabics on the dial, just applied indices all the way around, and a bespoke handset, the likes of which I have not come across elsewhere. Now, they actually sent me two different colours for review. I asked for this black and gold one, and they sent me the green one as well. They also have a couple of different blues available, a black without the gold, and a limited edition collaboration with the Watch Enthusiast Melbourne group. That one features a tuxedo dial and is double branded. I'll jump back and forth between the Heritage, the black one, and the green model over the course of the video. Let's do the all-important dimensions and specifications then. This one is 38.5mm in diameter, but actually looks a lot bigger. I thought it was a 40mm when I took it out of the box and put it on my wrist for the first time. 11.5mm thick with a 47mm lug to lug, 20mm between the lugs. Now, you would hope for a bit of taper on this style of retro bracelet, and indeed you get it all the way down to under 16 and back up to 17.5 at the clasp. As size for my 7-inch wrist, this one weighs 120 grams. On the nose, water resistance is 100 meters. It's a piece of rather tall, double-domed, almost box. I'm going to call it semi-box domed sapphire crystal covering the dial, and the movement in the back is a Swiss-made STP 121. Perhaps not quite what you were expecting, but I'm sure you are familiar with the STP nonetheless. One of the big draws, apart from being readily available, is a high degree of decoration when compared to the equivalent grade of ETA or Sellita. Unfortunately, you cannot see that decoration because of a closed case back. Oh well. You can see a rather attractive company logo representing that Ocean to Orbit thing etched into the centre, and around the edges, rather than the usual spec sheet, we have the GPS coordinates of Lotsa and its translation from Tibetan, South Peak. Okay, the case. Now we're getting into the good stuff. The case is really nice, as you would expect from a couple of guys who design for a living. They have designed a really attractive case, and there's a beautiful art to it. A lot of high polished surfaces, including a lug-to-lug chamfer, and even little edges on the inside of the lug itself where the bracelet end links attach. Drilled lugs, by the way, there are some NATO strap options coming for this one as well, so that will be handy there. It's a super fine brush on the side of the case and the upper lug surfaces, but it's a deliberately rougher vertical brush on the fixed bezel. Now, having that top facing surface brushed rather than polished emphasizes the watch as a sporty rather than dressy proposition. I guess that's exactly what the brand wants you to think, as they have been sending them up mountains after all. The unguarded crown has the logo etched into it, and it's got a chamfer on the edge facing the wrist for comfort. Overall, there's nothing radical here, but it's all very tastefully done and very well executed. Likewise, the bracelet is thoroughly appropriate for the watch. Female end links, meaning it's going to wear well on small wrist, and the links themselves are compact in length, allowing for extra comfort. Now, the clasp is fully machined upper and lower, has some nice double security triggers, and enough micro adjust holes, especially when you take those small links into consideration, but it doesn't feature any built-in on-the-fly adjustment capabilities, unfortunately. Let's get into the dial and hands then, and I'll switch between the two watches as appropriate. The dials are lovely. It's one of the nicest dial surfaces that I've seen, certainly on a watch costing less than £1,000. There's a lovely vertical brush finish to these, very much matching that vertical brush on the upper bezel surface that I mentioned earlier on. And it's really dynamic. The colours kind of pop, then fade, then pop, then fade. You can see that especially here with the green one. There's a triangular index applied at 12, rectangles everywhere else with double width examples at the 3 major compass points, and a neatly integrated printed minute track beyond them with small Arabics printed at the 5s. The Ocean to Orbit logo features for the 4th time on the watch on the dial. It's applied, but it's applied thinly to avoid fouling the hands. Now, the brand name and automatic are printed above the pinion, model name and depth rating printed beneath it. Perhaps though they should have printed the height rating rather than the depth rating, as 8,516 meters seems a lot more impressive than 100 meters. The sword, hour and minute hand are well proportioned, with the hour hand having almost like a rocket ship profile it flares out at its base. The flat high polished second hand has a red arrowhead tip, the only colour other than gold to feature on this dial anywhere. The green one is just all high polished silver. The second hand also has a triangular arrowhead counterbalance, which is a nice touch, mirroring that tip. Again, there's nothing particularly radical about any of this, but it's tastefully done and well executed. Quick lume video before we get the watch on wrist. BGW9 in the applied indices on all 3 hands. Now, I did wear this one for a shift at the Opera House inside a dark theatre. I thought perhaps there could have been a little bit more lume on the hands in particular, and I spoke to Dave, the owner. He said they will indeed be adding more lume to the hands for production units. It's not bad, it's just not particularly in your face, but it is still all perfectly legible at the end of my test. On wrist, it's a sweet wearing watch. I'm sure you've gathered by now there was nothing offensive in those dimensions. The case is relatively flat, but the female end links and small bracelet links ensure it still has a good fit. When I tried this one on for the first time, like I said, I thought it was a 40mm watch because the bezel is so thin, relatively speaking, meaning the dial is large relative to its overall size. Again, a neat design trick to make a watch that looks big and has the legibility that comes with a larger watch, but wears small and has the comfort that comes with a smaller watch. Alright, the moans and niggles section. They may be an Australian brand and really nice guys to boot, but nobody escapes the moans and niggles section. I guess my moans fall into 2 categories today: pricing and branding, and materials. Let's talk about pricing and branding first. Ocean to Orbit Lotsa. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, does it? I understand what they're trying to portray, the fact that their watches are capable of anything at any level, but I wonder if they might end up going to 020 or something slightly more compact and digestible in the future. Okay, the price, I have rather skirted around the price to this point. These are $795 US on pre-order and $895 US RRP. Not a massive discount then for giving them your money up front, but I guess $100 is not to be sniffed at. However, it's a tough price point for a new brand to come in at, between $750 and $1,000 US. Not many micros go straight in at that point. They tend to build up to it over the course of several years. Why? Because it is much harder to get someone to back your unknown brand, your new company, especially through a pre-order at $795 than it is at $295 or $395. Is it worth the money? Well, it's a lovely watch. There are no real weaknesses here, nothing glaring that bugs me anyway. It could slip onto one's wrist and provide years of service as a daily, but so could a lot of other watches at or around this price, or even below it. What about materials then? Well, materially it is very nicely made, it's very nicely finished, the brush dials look awesome, and it has a heap of wrist presence for a watch at this size. But I think they should have looked at a clasp with internal adjustment. That style of clasp has now become almost standard equipment at $500 on microbrands, let alone at nearly $800 on microbrands. And it's a funny movement choice. There's nothing wrong per se with the STP 111 or 121 or whatever, but they don't have the recognition and therefore they don't have the desirability of a Sellita or ideally an ETA. I wonder how many of you watching this video saw the watch for the first time and thought, oh, I really hope it has an STP in the back of it. Not many, I'll wager. But that's it really. If you're okay with the name, if you're okay with the movement choice, and you're okay with the price, this one has a great story attached to it already, and that is not easy to achieve with your first watch. So many brands either lie about their backstory or fall back all too heavily on their place of origin to provide that story for them. It is rare to see a small company thinking about things years in advance. I have never heard of a startup watch brand having the foresight to send a prototype up a mountain. That sets the bar pretty high, and I'm not sure anybody will be leaping over that particular bar anytime soon. I wish the guys all the very best with this model, and I look forward to seeing what they both come up with in the future. So there you have it. If you fancy an Aussie micro but not this Aussie micro, why not try this Aussie micro or this Aussie micro? Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. I'll see you again in the next one.